For years, I basically had my entire digital life spread across the same handful of companies. My email was with Google, my files were in Google Drive, my passwords were stored somewhere else, and when I wanted a VPN, that was yet another service. And honestly, I never really thought about it. It was convenient, everything worked. But the more I started thinking about how much personal information I was storing online, the more I started asking myself a simple question. Do I really want all of my digital life sitting in the hands of a few huge tech companies? That's what eventually led me to Proton. I'd heard about Proton Mail before. I've seen people recommend Proton VPN, but I didn't really understand how big Proton had become. Because today Proton isn't just an email service. It has cloud storage with collaborative documents, a password manager, a VPN, a calendar, video meetings, and even its own AI assistant. So I decided to actually go through the ecosystem and see what it's like to use Proton as more than just a Gmail alternative. And after testing the different services, I found some things I really liked, but also a few things that might make you think twice before switching. So in this video, I'm going to walk you through my experience with Proton, what I actually think is worth using, which plan makes the most sense, and whether I'd recommend making the switch. And if you want to try Proton while watching this video, I'll leave the link below. You can start with the free plan, so there's no need to commit to a paid subscription just to see what it's like. The thing that initially caught my attention wasn't really the VPN. It wasn't even the cloud storage. It was the email. Because think about how much information passes through your inbox: receipts, travel bookings, password resets, private conversations, financial documents, accounts you've created over the years. Your email address is basically connected to your entire online identity. And that's when Proton Mail started making sense to me. Instead of thinking about privacy as something complicated that requires a dozen different tools, Proton was basically saying, what if privacy was simply the default? That was the idea I wanted to test. The first thing I noticed when I opened Proton Mail was actually how familiar it felt. And I think that's important, because when a company talks a lot about encryption and privacy, you might expect the product to feel complicated, but Proton Mail doesn't. You have your inbox, folders, labels, search, settings. Basically everything you'd expect from a modern email service. The difference is what happens underneath. One of the features I immediately found interesting was the hide my email aliases. Instead of giving every website my real email address, I can create a separate alias. So if I sign up for a website and that address eventually starts getting spammed, I can simply disable the alias. That's a small feature, but it's one of those things that becomes more useful the more you use it. And another thing I liked is that I didn't have to immediately pay for Proton just to see how it works. There's a free plan. So if you're curious, you can actually create an account and test it yourself before spending anything. And if you want to do that, I'll put the Proton link in the description. After looking at Mail, I started exploring the other services, and Proton Pass was probably the one that surprised me the most. I already knew what password managers did: generate strong passwords, store them, autofill them, sync them across devices. Nothing revolutionary there. But then I started playing around with the email aliases. And this is where I started seeing the bigger picture. Let's say I'm signing up for an online store. Instead of giving that company my real email address, I can create a unique alias. Now, that website doesn't necessarily know my actual email address, and if that address ever gets leaked or starts generating spam, I can shut it down. The more I used it, the more I started thinking, this isn't really about storing passwords. It's about separating my digital identity from all the random websites I use. And that's a much more interesting proposition. If you currently don't use a password manager, this is actually one of the Proton products I'd recommend trying first. Then came the bigger question. Would I actually move my files to Proton Drive? Because cloud storage is different. I'm not talking about a password here. I'm talking about years of photos, documents, backups, and personal files. And this is where Proton's encryption model becomes much more interesting. I tested the basic workflow: upload a file, open it from another device, share it, and organize it into folders. From a usability perspective, it feels like the cloud storage you're already familiar with. but the philosophy behind it is completely different. The idea is that your files are encrypted in a way that prevents Proton itself from simply looking through them. One feature I think a lot of people would appreciate is automatic photo backup. You turn it on, and your phone can continuously back up your photos and videos. And this sounds pretty basic until you think about what happens if your phone gets lost, stolen, or simply stops working. Your phone shouldn't be the only place where your memories exist. I'm not using encryption because it sounds cool. I'm using it because these are my photos and my documents. The next thing I tried was Proton VPN. And this is probably where most people have already heard of Proton. The first thing I wanted to know was simple. Does it feel like a normal VPN? Because I don't want privacy to mean constantly fighting with complicated software. And the answer was basically yes. You open the app, choose a location, connect, and you're done. The paid version gives you access to a much larger server network, higher speeds, streaming support, and up to 10 simultaneous devices. But there's another thing I appreciate about Proton. There's a free VPN plan. It's limited, obviously. You get fewer locations, one device, and lower speeds. But if you've never used a VPN before and just want to understand what it does, you can try it without immediately paying. And this is probably the biggest thing I realized while going through Proton. At first, I thought I was reviewing Proton Mail. Then I thought I was reviewing Proton VPN, then Drive, then Pass. But eventually, I realized that's not really what Proton is selling. The interesting part is what happens when you put all of them together. Think about my digital life: email, passwords, files, photos, calendar, VPN. Instead of having all of those services scattered across different companies, Proton lets me bring them together under one account. And that's where Proton Unlimited starts making more sense. I wouldn't recommend paying for Unlimited just because it has a huge list of features. That's actually the wrong way to look at it. The question I would ask is, how many of these services would I actually pay for separately? But if I want the VPN, cloud storage, password manager, and premium email features together, suddenly the bundle becomes much more interesting. Proton currently lists Unlimited at €9.99 per month when billed annually, with the annual subscription billed upfront. And you also get the 30-day money-back guarantee. So personally, I think the value proposition becomes much stronger if you're already paying for several separate privacy services. If you're in that situation, this is probably the link I'd check. I've put the current Proton Unlimited offer in the description so you can compare the plans and see exactly what's included before making a decision. Now, there are some things I wouldn't ignore. The first is that switching your entire digital life isn't something you do in 5 minutes. If you've been using Gmail, Google Drive, and Google Calendar for years, you're already deeply integrated into that ecosystem. And Google has an enormous advantage here. Everything works together extremely well. And that's something I think is important to say. Proton isn't necessarily going to beat Google at everything. That's not why I choose it. I choose it because I'm willing to trade some of that convenience for more control over my data. And whether that trade is worth it is really up to you. The biggest thing I took away from testing Proton wasn't actually a specific feature. It was how I started thinking about my data. Before, I mostly thought, where can I store this? Now, I'm more likely to think, who has access to this? And I think that's the real reason Proton exists. It's not trying to convince everyone that Google or Microsoft are evil. It's giving people another option, an option where privacy isn't something you have to manually turn on after creating your account. It's built into the way the services are designed. So, after going through the Proton ecosystem, would I recommend it? If you're someone who doesn't really care about privacy, probably not. But if you've started asking yourself how much of your personal information is sitting with big tech, if you want to reduce the number of companies holding your data, or if you're already paying for several privacy tools and want to consolidate them, then I think Proton is genuinely worth considering. The biggest advantage isn't that every Proton product is automatically better than every competitor. It's the fact that they're all built around the same philosophy: private email, private files, private passwords, private browsing, all under one account. And that's what made Proton stand out to me. I started looking at it because I wanted a better email service, but the more I explored it, the more I realized Proton isn't really an email company anymore. It's trying to become an alternative to the way we use the internet. If you want to try Proton for yourself, I've put my link in the description and in the pinned comment. You don't have to jump straight into the paid plan. Start with the free version, try Proton Mail, Pass, Drive, or the free VPN, and see if you actually like using them. And if you decide you want the complete ecosystem, you can check out Proton Unlimited through the link as well. The paid plans also come with a 30-day money-back guarantee, so you can test the premium experience without taking the full long-term risk. Just make sure you choose the plan based on what you'll actually use, because the whole point of switching to Proton is supposed to be taking control of your digital life, not subscribing to another service you don't need. If this review helped you understand whether Proton is right for you, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.